Jaron Boots Ennis just had a great win over Amantis Stenios by making him retire after the 6th. So this makes Ennis the unified champion, now holding the IBF, WBA and Ring Magazine titles. There are only 2 more potential opponents he needs to take on in the 147 division to become undisputed. But he might not fight either of them opponents and might be looking at instead moving up to the 154 division. Let's talk about this. Let's dive in. Coming into the Stenios fight, there was question marks on Boots and him making weight, whether he was going to struggle or not. But he didn't seem to struggle. He seemed to make weight fairly easily. But also, because this was a unification bout and not just an IBF sanctioned title, there was no rehydration clause. So he could just put the weight back on after the 24-hour weigh-in. This, I think, can be an advantage for Boots, considering he's normally the bigger guy and there is no rehydration clause, so he can just come back in whatever weight he wants, rehydrate as much as he can. But that aside, after winning this fight, I think the target in the 147 division would be to be undisputed. And the 2 guys that are in his way is Marius Barrios and Brian Norman Jr. Marius Barrios holding the WBC and Brian Norman Jr. holding the WBO. So the natural progression you would think for Ennis would be to target those 2 fighters and make a deal with them, which I think they have tried to do. However, those 2 fighters have other opponents in mind. Brian Norman Jr. is looking at going over to Japan and defending his title against Jin Sasaki. Although this deal has not been made yet, if it does get done, then that means Brian Norman Jr. is out of the picture for the next fight for Boots. And Marius Barrios is looking at fighting either Errol Spence Jr. or Manny Pacquiao, one of them 2 fighters. So if that deal gets done with one of them fighters, then that means he's also out of the picture. So noting that the 2 fighters holding the belts in the 147 division are potentially off the market in terms of opponents next, I don't think Boots is going to hang around the 147 division. I think he's going to look at moving up to the 154 division. He was already looking at potentially moving up to fight Ortiz, however he stayed down to make a deal and fight for the WBA, which he's just obtained. So I think naturally, if he can't get them deals done, he'll just move up. But that's not saying that those deals can't get done. Nothing's been locked in for Marius Barrios yet or Brian Norman Jr. But if they both get locked in for other opponents, then I would anticipate that Boots moves up to the 154 division. I guess we'll see how good his team are at negotiating.
We're sending somebody in to negotiate!
Anybody else want to negotiate?
In my opinion, I'd prefer him to fight for the 2 belts and become undisputed. But if people are going to hold up the titles and they're going to look for other opponents and not want to fight for unification titles and undisputed titles, then there's no point of hanging around if you're already struggling with that weight in that weight class. And he's going to naturally move up eventually anyway. So the 154 division, that would be interesting, Boots moving into that division, because it is already a stacked division. So he'll just add on to that division and make it even more stacked. So more competitive bouts in the 154 division. I'd look forward to seeing that. Anyway, as always, what are your thoughts? Would you prefer Boots to stay in the 147 division? Would you prefer him to move up into the 154 division and stack that division more? What do you think? Let me know in the comments below, and until next time, peace out.
Myths in boxing, highlight real mean, front row seats to the blow by blow scene.